I have made the decision to look back at some of the work that I've done over the past year and finish off some of those jobs that were sort of 90% there but not quite. And as you can guess maybe from the position of the camera on the layout here, I'm going to look at the Victorian houses kit and get it finished and that little yard completed before I move on to the next project. So let's get started. So when I pulled out the box of bits for this kit and I had a look at the instructions, I was quite surprised to find that the only thing left to actually install on the house were the chimney pots. I was a lot further on with this build than I actually expected, and as you can see here, I've already started adding them to the stacks. So this is still very much a work in progress. I had wanted to get some more accessories for in and around the yards of both the buildings, but I haven't quite nailed them all yet. Hopefully this weekend, whenever I'm in Glasgow, I'll be able to pick up those final few items. But what we have in front of us here anyway are a few dustbins for the yards, an old mangle and an old bathtub, which I'm hoping to put in underneath a sort of open canopy. And we've also got there in the foreground a little window cleaner with a ladder and a bucket. You'll notice with the bucket there I have added water to it. I actually used rocket glue to fill that bucket, and there's a tiny piece of kitchen towel, the same thing that we used for the curtains, has been draped over the edge of the bucket just to add to it a little bit. So let's get these on the layout and then we'll call this project more or less done. And the chimney pots come in on the sprues in two halves. Now, the only reason I'm actually mentioning the chimney pots is because while I was putting them together, two things that you have an issue with these pots is, one, that you get that little join line from the two halves being put together. You probably won't be able to see that. You get that join line from sandwiching the two together, plus also the pots and wills kits are solid. You don't have a hole where the smoke was escape. So I just wanted to show you a wee quick tip for doing that. And what I have been doing first of all is just sanding away that little burr that you get at the top from, again, that join, and flattening off the bottom. And then with my pin vise, I'm using let me see, 1.6mm drill bit in the end of it, and what I'm doing is trying to find the center point as best as possible and just drilling a hole which is probably about 68mm, maybe more, in depth down into the pot. Now you want to be careful that you don't go too near the edge, because obviously you're going to come out the side of the pot and you have to scrap that pot and make another one up. But if I get that drilled through, I can show you the other little tip that I wanted to share with you. And I'm just checking the sides of this to make sure my drill bit isn't going to veer off out the edges of this. No, it's fine. And once you're in far enough, before taking it off, it makes a perfect little stand that you can take your sandpaper and get those little side burrs off too, just with the sand down. The chimney pots are very fiddly, and to try and sand them between finger and thumb is next to impossible. And then unscrew that, and we've got a much better looking chimney pot. And if I show you the ones that I've already put in place, just by having those holes in there makes it look an awful lot better. The windows have already had some acetate fitted to it, and if you see round the back here, I've been adding the curtains and blinds already, and they don't look too bad actually. Now, it's a very simple process actually. Basically we take some kitchen tile. I saw this on another YouTube channel. I thought it was very clever, so I thought I'll have to give that a go. And we'll just get a straight edge to it there, and then we'll trim. This particular curtain is going to be square or straight edge, so we don't need to worry about giving it a bit of a bend. We have our paper tile cut, and then usually there's at least 2 ply to these paper tiles, and it's just a matter of trying to separate those as gently as you can. Try not to rip it. Okay, and we'll set. Now I cut it, you could easily just put it across the whole thing like that, but what I want to do is try and just get a little chink in the curtain, so whenever the light shines through it, it will sort of, the light will be hopefully a little bit sharper. I'm just going to cut that in half because I don't think I'll actually need the other half piece of this. Hopefully I can cut it without ripping it. Nope. So if I lay that on there, and with your watered down PVA that you would use for your ballasting, which I have a huge tub of here, we're just going to dab it onto the tissue and let it soak in. One, that's going to obviously glue it to the acetate beneath, but also when it dries out, it dries clear, as you know, and it just gives a nice finish to it. It can look a bit blotchy whenever you first have it on, but once that dries, it works out quite well. And we'll add the other piece. You can just see a gap in the top right hand pane there, which might just add a nice little bit of detail whenever it comes to the lighting being added. What you could also do, if you wish, particularly if you're working with the white paper tile, is, as I've done in the rear one there, is to add a little bit of colour to it. And I'm just using acrylic paints, and they're very, very watered down, and we're just dabbing it onto the tissue. You need very, very little, and it will dry a little bit lighter than what it looks to begin with. You can see there's a little hint of green, and if we turn around to the back, this is the one that I did previously, and I mixed a little bit of green and yellow or separate paints and just splotched it on, just to give the idea that it is a patterned curtain on that particular window. So it's a nice little touch. With the curtains done and not looking too bad, it's time to move on to the interior, and all I'm trying to do there is to create a compartment for each particular room, so that light, if you're viewing through the front window, you're not going to see directly out the back window. So with that in mind, I've glued in the base on the between the ground and the first floor, and then I've placed a diagonal strip of card across the main part of the building, and then another piece to divide the 2 extension parts. On the upper side, it's basically been divided into 4 squares. This room and this room are going to be lit. Now you will see here that I have blacked out this room, and it's very important to do so. I haven't done this one yet, and if I light up the 2 rooms now, you will see a significant difference. You do get light bleed through the plastic, and by just adding that black paint onto it, just eliminates that completely. Another aspect that I've also included in the build is adding these little partitions part way across. You'll see it better on the one that's not been painted yet. And essentially it's just to diffuse the light. The LED's actually coming down into this little section here. So by painting all this black and adding this sort of diffuser into it, it's reducing the amount of light that's coming out through this window, and it gives it just a nice dull feel. I dare say there's probably resistors in that you could get out there that would do exactly the same thing, but me being completely non-electrical minded, this seemed the simple approach to work with. Okay, so this camera's really struggling to pick up any sort of light in this sort of complete darkness, but if I put on the front lights now, hopefully you can see there's just a nice dim light coming through those curtains, and you can sort of see a little bit extra light coming through where the curtains don't quite meet in the middle, and that's exactly the effect that I'm looking. It's that idea of somebody sitting up in bed reading a book before bedtime, and you can just sort of just about see the dimness of the light coming through those curtains. So let me turn the house round and we'll look at the back. And there's really quite a striking difference. Now obviously it's enhanced even more with the camera struggling to pick up the light, and there's also light bleed over the top of the roof because the roof isn't fixed down as yet, but it's just it's a ghostly white light there really. You're maybe not being able to pick up the light bleed coming through the plastic, but believe me, it is there as well. So it's the reason why I'm going to go down the road that I have done. Once I get that fitted, it's moving on to the exterior. So let me finish this and then we'll get on to the external aspects of this little building. The house is now bedded in. I've glued it down just with standard PVA and waited it until it had completely dried off. Once that was done though, I did discover that there was a couple of little gaps, certainly along the front window there on the left hand side, so I've just used a little bit of fine blended turf from Woodland Scenics to disguise that. You'll also notice that I've added a wee touch of ivy up the wall around the gate on the right hand side. Again, very much modeller's license here. This was to hide another gap between the yard wall and that of the house, and it proves quite effective. So the only thing left to do now is to add a few details, and let's have a look now at what I've been doing. So this is still very much a work in progress. I had wanted to get some more accessories for in and around the yards of both the buildings, but I haven't quite nailed them all yet. Hopefully this weekend, whenever I'm in Glasgow, I'll be able to pick up those final few items. But what we have in front of us here anyway are a few dustbins for the yards, an old mangle and an old bathtub, which I'm hoping to put in underneath a sort of open canopy. And we've also got there in the foreground a little window cleaner with a ladder and a bucket. You'll notice with the bucket there I have added water to it. I actually used rocket glue to fill that bucket, and there's a tiny piece of kitchen towel, the same thing that we used for the curtains, has been draped over the edge of the bucket just to add to it a little bit. So let's get these on the layout and then we'll call this project more or less done. And there we are, the scene is set. I think it looks pretty good, and I hope you do too. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this video, and I'll be back again soon with the next one. See you for now.